So this is the Ipython notebook for the Titanic data project. And Ipython notebook is a form that contains a mixture of Markdown and interactive Python cells. So we've split up the assignment into several different tasks, and we're just going to go through them step by step. First task is to read the first 10 passengers' information and display them on the screen. So we start off with an import statement to import CSV, which is Python's CSV module. Makes it easy to handle CSV files. And we open up the Titanic CSV file that contains all our records, and that's assigned to the variable file. And then we're going to create a CSV reader object using that file, which just contains a list of the rows in that file. And then we're going to unpack that using a list comprehension, and that will just create a list of all the rows in Python's native list object. So here we're going to iterate through that data list from the first record to the 10th record. So position 0 is going to contain just metadata about the CSV file, and we don't want that, so we start at position 1. And here we're going to unpack the row into the relevant fields. So we've got whether the passenger survived, their class, name, sex, age, which are the ones that we want for this task. And we're just going to print those out with the separator of a comma there. I'll go ahead and do that. And there we go, just laid out in the same format as that print statement. The second task was to write an awk script, and awk's a language used awk is a utility available on Linux systems for processing text. So we've written just a short awk script here, where we just start off declaring a field separator for the CSV file, and then we print out the fields, the first, third, fourth, second, fifth, and sixth fields in that CSV file, which correlate to survived, last name, other names, class, sex, and age. We can't operate that here in the Ipython notebook, but we can in a Linux terminal do that. So I've got that awk script as a file here. I can show you that. There we go, it's the same as that script down there. And we'll just run awk on that CSV file. And there we go. So it just prints out our records. There's a lot of records there. There we go. The third task is to write the information of passengers who survived into a CSV file. And the fields we want to write are the last name, other names, passenger class, gender, and age. So what we're going to do first is create a CSV file in write mode. And that is going to be in the directory output. So I'll just show you there. Currently, in output, there's no CSV file. But after we run this script, there'll be a new CSV file containing our information. So we're just going to create an empty list that will contain all the surviving passengers. And then we'll go through the data list and unpack each row and check if the passenger survived. So if the survived field's equal to 1, then the passenger survived. And there we'll split up the name, because the name in the data list is one big thing, but we want to split it up into the last name and the other names. So we split it there using namesplit. And our new row object contains all the different fields, which we will just append into that survived unsorted list. And then we sort it into a list called survived, just plain survived. And we're going to write it into that CSV file if I execute that now, we should be able to, yep, surviving passages.csv. Can open that up in Excel. And we've got a list of all the passengers who survived. So the fourth task is to find out the percentage of females among all the passengers that survived. So what we're going to do here is, using a list comprehension, we'll filter that survived list for all the female passengers and create a new list called females. And then the percentage of survivors is just going to be the length of that females list, which is the number of records, and the length of that survived list divided by. And we'll print it out here in a percentage format. Yeah, pretty simple there. So that's 68.13% of the surviving passengers female. The fifth task here is to find the percentages of each class among all the passengers and find out what the percentages of each class were that survived the Titanic. So we're going to create empty lists for each class and for those who survived from each class. Just class 1, class 2, class 3. Class 1 survived, class 2 survived, class 3 survived. And then for the big dataset list, we're going to just use a simple if-else if to sort all the passengers into their relevant class. Doing the same thing on the list of surviving passengers, we'll sort them into their list for the surviving passengers. And then we can work out the percentage of survivors by dividing the length of that class by the full length of the dataset, minus the first record, which is just metadata. Do that for all those classes. And we're going to do the same for the survivors by dividing the length of the class survived list by the full length of that class. And we'll print them all out. 3 print statements. There we go. And the sixth final task is to draw 2 bar charts representing the number of passengers on each class on board and the number of passengers of each class that survived the Titanic. So we're going to use matplotlib to create a bar chart here. So we're going to use the length of that classes list, which is just the number of classes. Pretty simple, but it's just a way to ensure that if you had a larger data set with more classes, you could perform the same thing automatically without having to count it. So it's going to be 3. We're going to do the same for the classes survived. And we're going to generate a list using that. Just going to be 1, 2, 3, which is going to be our X ticks. And we'll draw the first bar chart, which is the distribution of passengers through the classes. So we're going to use X1 for the X ticks, classes for the Y values, and we'll color it green. And the labels set to class 1, class 2, class 3, distribution of passenger classes for the title, and show the graph. Going to do the same thing for the second bar chart, which is the percentage of each class that survived. Doing the same thing, and that should show the second graph. If we run that, we should get 2 graphs. There we go. And so that's the end of our task on the Ipython notebook.